coming from the great American Southwest, from the very low desert. Good morning, good evening, whatever the case may be to all my listeners around the world. I'm your host, Lionel Tavares from the Sabbath at Midnight, here to bring you another exciting episode. So tonight we have a special guest. He reached out, well, actually reached out to him. He left this very interesting comment on my YouTube. And when I see his story that's interesting, I know the Holy Spirit's, nagging me to go, not nagging me, but pulling me to go ask that person, hey, give me more of that story. So that's exactly what I did. He reached out right away, and now he is here. And his story, I heard a piece of it, and of course it was exactly what my feeling was. A very crazy, interesting story. And I mean that with all due respect. So before we jump into that, let's talk about subscribing and all that good stuff. So yes, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, especially on YouTube, because eventually, once I get all the episodes caught up from Spotify to YouTube, we are going to only be on YouTube. But don't worry, Spotify's going to be up here for a little while longer, but just keep in mind moving forward, anytime soon here, we're going to be moving full time to YouTube. So with that being said, if you want to help the show grow, please become a member through Buzzsprout. That will help you, that will get you access to members only episodes, and also give you discounts on merchandise and stuff like that. I got some new shirts coming out next week. All Sabbath at Midnight, the big green logo on the front, the crucifix, and we got the old English lettering in the back. So keep an eye out for that. I'll post it on YouTube when they're available. So let's get into this episode. So, as I always say, hit the head, grab yourself a coffee, kick your feet up, and let's get ready for an episode of nothing but interesting topics. Alrighty, so we got our guest here. His name is Joe Dell, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell the audience about himself. He has a very interesting background. So without further ado, sir, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
How you doing, guys? First off, Lionel, Dominic, thank you for having me on. I'm honored and privileged, and I thank the Lord that I'm still here to tell my story, and as I tell it, you'll understand why. My name is Joe Dell. I'm a keyboard player and musician. I was in a band called Sleepy Hollow from 1999 to 2010. Most recently, I've actually did a design for the Metal Hall of Fame Metal Across America series. I did 53 designs for the tour shirts, one for each state. Also authored the book Going Over back in 2013. And let me start off, and if you guys would like, I'll start off with my background, give a quick introduction to my beginnings.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's just like we talked earlier, man. Just tell everybody about your background, the people you're connected to, and, do whatever your heart leads you. But those kind of things, helps the audience understand like how deep these kind of things go. They're these kind of things that happen to you on every single corner of every different, type of level of society,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was brought up in the town of Lodi, New Jersey, which, is probably well known for the rock group The Misfits. I had my mother was from Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. My father was originally from Lodi. I come from a mostly Italian background, a little Irish, but the funny part is my father's side, my great-grandfather was in the mob and was killed before my grandfather was born. And then on my mother's side, my great-grandfather actually had to take the family out of Sicily because the mob wanted to kill him and his family.
Jeez.
So that's how we ended up in America, I guess. And, down the generations, the town of Lodi. Now, I'm going to talk like this now because they don't exist anymore. It was big-time mob. My father told me back in his day when he was a kid, because where we lived was across the street from the middle school, like on a catty corner. But before that, that was just an empty lot. My father lived down the block in an apartment complex. He told me there was more firearms in the basement of his apartment complex than at the police station growing up. So eventually, my grandfather and grandmother bought one of the plots of lands that was in this open lot. And this is relative to something which I'm going to tell later. And once, every house was built, my father did the blueprints for the house that we lived in. 3 other plots were bought, And, you know, Mr. Ciliento next door, a couple other, you know, families behind us. And that's where the house originally originated. My father was about 9 years old. So fast forward, my father was in the service during Vietnam, gets out. My godfather, who had married my mother's cousin, introduced my parents. So married my mother. She moved in from Brooklyn and ended up in Lodi, and that's where we resided. I was born about a year later. A couple of years after that, my sister was born, and I came to find out years later when I was, you know, a teenager that my mother actually had cancer. My mother was in the medical journal 1975 because she was one out of only 4 women in the country that had cancer in the Bartholin gland. They had to actually remove like a tumor, a grapefruit-sized tumor to get my sister out. So this is what I've been told, you know, semi-recently, but I didn't, of course, didn't know at the time. I was a child. And I remember always going, like getting picked up in kindergarten to, you know, take my parents who would go for the hospital for whatever reason, which I didn't know at the time was because of my mother. And that was my early childhood. So what I'll start off with is the house I was brought up in was a place where there was a lot of odd occurrences. Now, I come from, like, my mother was very religious. You know, my mother was a religious woman, you know, my grandmother as well. It was a mother-daughter house. Grandmother lived downstairs in the basement apartment. You know, we lived upstairs. And the earliest memory of something odd happening in the house was when I was 3 years old. I have to give you the vision of the house, maybe get a blueprint of it. If you walked in through the front door, you went through a foyer into the living room. Go through the living room. The entrance or exit on the right was an archway going into a hallway, which was a rounded hallway. If you went to the left, it was the kitchen. Hard left to the kitchen, left to the bathroom, then off to the forward left would be like parents' room, and then to the right, my sister's room, and then off to the far right, around a small turn would be my bedroom. Just so you have the picture of the house. And I remember being 3 years old and waking up in the middle of the night one night and seeing a shadow. Now, keep in mind, at this age, you don't know science. You don't know anything. There was a shadow on the wall, bright light, hitting the wall with a shadow of an elderly woman rocking in a rocking chair. Now, my grandmother had a rocking chair downstairs. I don't think there was a rocking chair up by us. So I saw this and I thought it odd. So I left my room, went to my bedrooms, my parents' bedroom, and I tugged on like my mother, you know, ma, you know, Joseph, what's wrong? I'm like, there's a shadow of a woman in a rocking chair on the wall in the living room. She's like, oh, that's just your grandmother. Go to bed. Oh, okay. So I didn't think nothing of it because I figured it was my grandmother downstairs and it was casting a shadow upstairs. I didn't know science, you know. So I walked by. I tried to look to the right. And it was a bright light just beaming me in the eye out of the living room, which wasn't like, you know, the living room light or anything. It was almost like maybe a powerful flashlight kind of light, if I had to compare it to something. And I went back to bed. And then years later, when I learned you cannot cast a shadow from one floor to another, you know, through a floor, I thought about, and I said, I'm like, that was odd. I'm like, that wasn't my grandmother. You know, it hit me. And I'm going to fast forward another 3 years when I was 6 years old. Now, this was another incident that happened at the house. Now, again, I'm not somebody who jumps to supernatural just off the cuff. You know what I mean? If a candle moves across a table, I'm looking for a string. You know, like I try to weed out everything logically before I go, okay, there's something here. Plus, when you hear or see something, it might be your senses. Maybe they say play tricks on you, this and that. When multiple people are seeing it or hearing it, and I don't believe in a mass psychosis. You know, maybe in wartime there might be because you're being traumatized, but I don't believe that everybody could see something and hallucinate the same thing at the same time. I don't think that to be true. It was Christmas Eve. Now, back in the day, you gotta remember, I'm 51 years old, so we're going back to 1979, right? In those days, Christmas Eve, the parents, you know, they put you to bed, you know, they put the toys, you know, the gifts out, and they would wake you up. Hey, you know, kids, Santa's here. So at this point in time, my aunt moved to California. My grandmother was out in California visiting for Christmas. So downstairs, there was nobody there. We had no pets in the house at the time. And my mother comes and wakes my sister, wakes me up. Jennifer, Joseph, Santa's here. Let's open the gifts. All right, we're excited. We hop out of bed, and as we're going to the living room in the hallway, all of a sudden we hear in the basement, which sounded like pots, pans, silverware crashing, hitting the ground. It just sounded like it was a ruckus going on downstairs. So my mother turns to my father and says, "Joe, go downstairs, see who's down there." So he goes downstairs. Now, from their bedroom, there was a doorway that led downstairs, down a stairwell into the basement. If you walk down the stairwell, right ahead was the actual basement, the boiler, all that. To the right was my grandmother's apartment. So we're standing by the hallway, peeking around the corner of the door, my mother, me, and my sister. My father goes into the basement, comes out, goes into my grandmother's apartment, a couple minutes, comes back up, and he has this bewildered look on his face. So my mother questions him, says, "Joe, who's down there?" He responds, "Nobody's down there." She's like, he goes, all the windows and doors are locked from the inside, right? Because, you got to remember also back in the day, it was a lot of B&Es being done on Christmas Eve because, they think people go to parties, they got a bunch of expensive gifts, under the tree, it's a good hit. So, and she says, "Who caused the mess?" And he says, "There's no mess down there." Now, my whole family heard it this one time. This wasn't like the incidents where I saw a shadow. It was we all heard this. And I remember being scared as I opened my Christmas gifts on Christmas Eve, because there was no answer, and we heard it. It was loud. So that was the next odd occurrence that would have happened at the house that I was living in.
Yeah. I think Dominic is the one that had more experiences when he was a kid. But as far as for me, I didn't really have too many experiences. But that's wild already, with the whole. So what do you think that was? So when you go back and look at it, was there some light just pouring out of a portal, and you just looked at it and didn't think anything of it?
Well, there was definitely something going on within the house because there was always, I'll tell you, and like I said, there's things I haven't told people. When my sister was 8 years old, she took a jump rope, wrapped it around the top of her bed, and put it around her neck and tried hanging herself at 8 years old. Oh, wow. Now, an 8-year-old has no reason. Plus, we were good then. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was, it wasn't like there was any problems in the family, anything like that. She didn't have any depression or anything. And I always felt particularly that her bedroom was the nucleus of where this bad energy or whatever you would call it was coming out of. It was, in my room, I have a bunch of the stories in the house. So it sounds funny, but to guess, my aunt, now I said there's going to be some heavy stuff, some speculation, but my aunt wanted to be rich. My father stated once that my aunt always knew what she wanted ever since she was a little kid. All right. My aunt wanted money. I remember at a point in time when I was an adult, I asked my aunt, "Are you a Christian?" And she says, "Oh, you believe in God?" She goes, "Well, I don't believe there's a man in the sky that rewards me when I do good." But she's like, "I suppose there's something, And my grandmother always assumed that she was a Christian, the rose-colored glasses that a parent would wear. And what I question is, now, there's going to be a lot of things I'm tying in together, so I apologize if the web gets a little complex, but my aunt was rich, millionaire, owns beachfront property in Seaside Heights, had a beautiful $1 million home in Franklin Lakes. The original house, the one she lives in now isn't the original. The original one, that used to creep me out too. And the odd thing is, I always felt like, I guess you guys might have known if you ever go into a building, it's not always the whole building, but there's certain areas of the building that are specific. In this house, it was, not a mansion, but it was a big, good-sized house, good property, with the forest as a backyard kind of, dwelling. The basement always made me feel weird, but the weird thing there was this charcoal drawing of a woman that she kept. Now, my sister and I would make jokes about it being a witch, but I found later that this came from when she was in college. Now, I am not sure, but the thing is, my sister's bedroom was my aunt's old bedroom. This picture of this woman gave me some bad vibes. And when they moved to the new house, it wasn't in the basement anymore. They put it at the end of the dining room table, which was an odd picture to be putting at the end of a dining room table. I can't explain it. Just picture, it was a woman who had like a more kind of a sorrow look on her face, long brown hair, but it was a beautiful drawing. It was very clear, very particular. Like it wasn't, it wasn't abstract. And in the basement at her old house, used to get that weird vibe. And I remember because we used to stay over there, and there was, certain feelings I would get there. And my question is, because when my aunt went to college, that's when my grandfather died. Now, I'll tell you let me say a couple side stories quick. In 2000, I was doing the census, right? I became friends with everybody we worked with. Okay, and I got to throw everything at you guys because I need all this out there because this is facts. Like I said, I'll go under a polygraph for any of these stories. I met a girl, Joanne, and her husband, George. Became friends with them. They lived in Hasbrook Heights, a town over from me. And, we hung out, whatever. We'd hang out in the basement. She was married. They lived in George's mother's house. The grandmother lived there, and they had a newborn baby, maybe a year old, whatever, that lived, that was in there too. So it was in a little home. So we're in the basement hanging out, and I look over, and just, it's, cluttered, but there was this rocking horse that just creeped me out. And I looked over, and, I just got this vibe. And all of a sudden I said, well, listen, guys, I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful, but I said, there's something about that rocking horse that creeps me out. At the exact same, I got goosebumps as I'm telling this, because you could tell when somebody's making a story up, they stutter, they add, they this, they that. This was like, as soon as I said it, both of them looked at each other and their jaws dropped. And one of them stated, you know why that's there? And I said, I don't know if it doesn't fit in the garage. They're like, no, that was in the baby's room. Every night that we put the baby to sleep, the baby would start crying, screaming, and finally the baby was pointing at the rocking horse. And they took the rocking horse, put it in the basement, baby stopped crying. Everything was solved, right? So she goes into a story. Now, I would believe that somebody wouldn't tell a story about their parents like this if there wasn't truth to it. So she starts telling me this story. She says, yeah, I came from my father's house. My father's a multimillionaire that lives in Upper Saddle River. Now, Upper Saddle River in New Jersey is the equivalent to Beverly Hills in California, so you guys know. And she said that one night when they were sleeping over in her old bedroom. Now, you got to remember, don't think of houses like we grew up in. This is a mansion. Her and her husband were sleeping in her old bedroom. She woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know if she went for a drink of water, something like that. So she gets up. She's at about 2, 3 in the morning, starts walking down the stairs, and she starts hearing whispering in the living room, talking to her father. She heard it was like that kind. And as her foot hit the last step, she heard, it's your daughter, and all the voices stopped. She said she went into the living room to look. She was talking to her father like that late at night, and nobody was in there, and her father was passed out in his evening chair. She goes upstairs, her husband's awake, asks George, she goes, George, and I'm telling this pretty smooth because I've told the story many times because I believe this story and to be true, and it just stuck with me. And she says, George, were you awake when I got up? And he said, no, why? She said, because, she goes, what did you hear? He goes, I don't know, sound like some people talking to your father. She said, nobody's there. It's just my father in the living room. Said the next day, she approached her father and said, what did you do? You sold my brother out to demons so you become rich. I know it. And he's like, what are you talking about? She said, I heard them talking to you last night in the living room. The demons were talking to you. And he's like, you were dreaming. And she goes, no, I wasn't. She goes, George heard him too. And then as soon as she said that, he grabbed his keys and left. Wow. Conversation ended. And she told me that at the point in time where her father was starting to get rich, starting to get money, her brother was 19 going on 20, and his body was deteriorating. Said that they took him to doctors, tested for AIDS, tested for cancer, and came up clean. And the day he died, they did an autopsy and they found nothing wrong with her brother. And she said, to this day, I'm telling you, I swear that he sold my brother out to demons so he could become rich. And that story stuck with me because, and she said also, like, I met her sister too, baby sister at the time was about 14. She goes, now picture this, like I use logic and reason when it comes to stuff. I don't just, go in outer space all the time, but like, she's 14 years old, lives in a mansion in Upper Saddle River. Picture a Jersey version of, Beverly Hills. She would call crying in the middle of the night, Joanne, her sister, begging to pick her up so she could sleep by her. Why would a 14-year-old girl want to leave a mansion to sleep in a small little house in Hasbrook Heights with like her sister and a bunch of in-laws, unless there was really something going on at that house? So I put that on the table because now I question, because, I reflect on a lot of things. I'm like, I wonder if my aunt learned something in college, and when she came home, she did some kind of incantation in my sister's room, which, released something, but she did it under the pretense of becoming rich one day, which she did. You know what I mean? She became very wealthy. And I'm talking my uncle, which was her husband, ran a company, multi-million-dollar company, into the ground at one time, went under. And it was like, oh, Uncle Bob lost his job, 2 weeks later, he got another job. He was a president of a company, got another job as a president of a company after running a business down the toilet. So, yeah. So it's like, I question it because there was such bad vibes in that house. And again, my mother being a Christian, my mother after, we were Catholic, of course, Italian, Irish. But then when I was about 7, my mother went to a different church that they used to call born again Christians at the time. And, with the whole sales pitch, the Catholics, you can eat meat on Friday, you can't eat meat, we just go by the Bible, blah, 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 blah. And I ended up going to the church and I gave my life to Jesus when I was 8 years old, which I thought was going to be like smooth sailing. Like, I didn't realize that, like, because back then we didn't get the hardcore preaching. Like every Sunday was Jesus died for your sins and, the blood of Christ, and which is good. But like, we didn't get deep into the principalities and spirits of the air and all that, So as far as we know, like we believed in those days, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, it was 1980. In those days, we didn't believe in it. Like we weren't taught like there was evil spirits, there was demons, we were told, it's all make believe. You know what I mean? God's God, you got angels and, and the devil's there, but, that's it. Like it really wasn't emphasized that these things were really like, you're going to pound you. It's a war. You have to wear your spiritual armor, and that's something that like we were never taught. There was, there's a lot of, 66 books in the Bible, and we kind of just hung in the Gospels. That was it.
Yeah.
But I would disappear into Revelations because you got to remember, when you're a kid, that's, you kind of find that interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As a kid, I was very, connected to Revelation because it just, it was, I don't know if the word exciting is the right word for it because it's like it's a scary book, but it was just more interesting and exciting because, as a kid, what is the end of the world? What monsters are coming back,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Dom, do you have anything to say? You're quiet over there. If you have anything to say, pop right in.
No, I'm just listening, man.
Okay.
Because I'll tell you guys one thing. Now, just question. I know. Now, Dominic, are you around my age or younger?
He's older than my dad.
Oh, no, I'm my 50s, man.
Okay, so you know where I'm coming from. Okay, good. So he's catching on. So back in the day, we went to church. And I'll be honest, we're kids. It's not the most fun thing to do. You couldn't wait to get home, watch the ball game, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But back then, what they had for the kids were like little comic books. They were like, I'd say about 2 inches high, maybe 3 inches wide, and they'd have it in the foyer by the church. So one day, I'll tell you, because we're talking about Book of Revelations, like, there was one that said 666, Mark of the Beast, right? And it had like, the old cartoon devil, whatever. So I'm like, oh, this looks interesting. And I grabbed it. And I remember this is like 1981-ish, I'm thinking we're talking. So back in those days, we still had the cash registers that had the numbers that popped up at the top at the supermarkets, And I started reading this, and as I'm reading it, and you got to remember, back then, again, this is the 80s, it was like science fiction to me because I'm reading like, oh, and then the Antichrist will deceive the world and blah. I'm like, deceive the world? How's this ever going to happen? How is he going to deceive the world? I'm like, it's in the book and we know what to look for. When he shows up, we're going to go, oh, that's the Antichrist. But it also was saying that the mark of the beast, this is back, I said, in 81, it said the mark of the beast will not be a number, the 3 6s. It said it will be a barcode. And it was explaining how it was going to be a barcode and it's going to be worked through computers. And again, for 1981, this was like, again, to me, it was like science fiction. But if you fast forward, 40 years, now I could see it happening. Like if I read the same book now and never read it before, I'd be reading it like I was reading a newspaper,
Oh yeah, man, absolutely, dude. All that stuff is way ahead of its time. And when I was a kid, I always ran into things like that. I think it's for a reason, but yeah, since I was a kid, I thought the mark of the beast was going to be something a lot more complicated than a tattoo with 666 on it. That's for sure.
Yeah. So you're younger, but I said back then it was just, we had the old horror movies or whatever, but I'm going to go back into the house now. Well,
Okay.
I'll give you another thing that another level of stuff. And like I said, this is stuff that like, I want to get it out because I haven't heard anybody talk about certain things that I'm talking about. Now, Dominic probably remembers. Now, back then, I got my first keyboard. I had a paper route. I was 11 years old. We're going to go back to 1984, 85, I believe. Now, I was a metalhead back then. So, big into Ozzy, Maiden, Priest, all that stuff. Metallica was just coming out. I don't even think I even really knew them at that point. I think I had one album out. So I ended up buying a keyboard. A friend of mine bought a guitar. Another friend had drums. So we started a band. We called it Live Evil, which was the title of a Black Sabbath album, a live album. So we thought that'd be a cool name for a band. You're 11 years old. That's I'll call a band that. And what we did, because like I said, and again, back then, you got to remember the occult and that was embedded in metal deep. Like if you look at old pictures of Slayer, they haven't done it since the beginning ages, but they all wore upside down crosses. They had face makeup on. You had Merciful Fate. We had a lot of Motley Crue had the pentagram on the Shout at the Devil album. Like so, this Ozzy. Diary of a Madman had the inverted cross. So this is like we just tied it with metal, but we didn't take it serious because to us it was just it was art. It was just it was metal was heavy, it was dark, it kind of fit. That was it. So my friend, we wanted to get some books on the occult to like come up with lyrics or whatever for songs. And you couldn't get it out of the library as a kid because it was in the adult section. You had to be 18 years old. So we went to the library once with his aunt, in the middle of town, and he was allowed to take 3 books out. So my friend Bobby goes, all right, he goes, Joe, you pick one, I pick 2, and I'll get my aunt to take the books out for us. So, all right, cool, whatever. So he's looking through whatever books he's looking through. So I'm going through the books, and I found, because I'm an artist, of course, it said, occult symbols. That was the book, right? And I'm looking through it, I'm flipping through it. I always found that interesting. And it was like these odd symbols. Like you always saw the pentagram, you saw the inverted cross, you saw certain things, but like they had weird things that were like all called like it looked like a baseball. Like it was like this round circle with this like offshoot S that like to me resembled a like weird stuff. So I was like, I'm grabbing this, So we get the books. But I go home. We would go home that day, whatever. So I start getting into this occult book, right? I start writing these symbols all over the desk in the hallway. All right, we had a chalk or whatever. Parents didn't care. It was an old desk my father got from his job, and I just, as an artist, I was like replicating these symbols all over this desk, right? So now, as an adult, and you guys know, we're like, that's not a good thing to do. But as a kid, I didn't think nothing of it. It was a Saturday, okay. I was taking a nap on the floor in the living room. Like as kids, you fall asleep on, you can sleep anywhere. Now after, nowadays you need a nice memory foam cushion to lay on. But like back then, a rug was fine with a pillow, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sleep. My mother says to me, she goes, Joseph, don't sleep too long. You got to go to bed tonight. We got to go to church tomorrow. I look back and I go, what did God ever do for me? Which was a bad thing. I'm getting goosebumps as I tell this, guys. It's a bad thing to do. And I want this out there so people learn and know this. You can't mess with this stuff. I fall asleep on the floor. I have a 2-part dream. First part of the dream I'm in my bedroom and I'm sick. And all I knew was my family was in the living room. I needed to get to them. And I crawl out of bed. And as I'm crawling from the bedroom into the living room, I'm losing weight. I'm vomiting. I'm sick, like I never was sick before. And then I make it to the living room. And then the scene changes. I can't tell you how many, every hair on my body's on end now telling this. Then the scene changes. And I wake up next to my parents' bed. I get up, and Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil, is playing from somewhere, but not the song like you would hear it proper. Like, you know, I gotta remember, we had vinyl back then. Like this sounded like, and Dominic might remember, you know, you left your vinyl like in sunlight, you warped your record, and if you try playing it, it has this weird, like sound to it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So that's what it sounded like. And it was coming from somewhere. And as I stand up next to the bed, my father is on the side my mother usually would sleep on, and he's acting crazy. Like he's writhing and he's just saying weird stuff. And then on the other side is my mother in a coffin with a Bible and rose on her chest. Okay. Now at this time, I didn't know my mother even had cancer. And in my family, every male died before the female. So it's not something subconscious that I would think, well, so many women died. You know, no. All the men died. The longevity were in the women. So I get up in the dream and I walk into the living room. My sister's already in the living room, right? And I'm like, Jennifer, I'm like, where's that coming from? I go, check the record player. And she looks, she goes, there's no record on the record player. So she goes, in the dream, the window's open in the living room. She goes to the window, you know, in the front, looking to see if it's coming from out the window. And my cat is there. I pick up the cat and I start floating in the air. And then the cat turns to me and it looked like a Baphomet, the cat. The ears, whiskers were out to the side and it had like a goatee. And it hisses at me and I wake up. I pop up on that floor, sweating bullets. My mother looks at me. She goes, Joseph, what's wrong? I look at her. I go, Ma, I will never say anything bad about God ever again. And it was left at that. She never even knew the dream I had that day. Now, here's the thing. 7 years later, now, when I was in high school, I was built. I was always working out. I had the biggest chest in high school. You know, like I was in good shape. I took supplements and all that. You know, they ended up flooding me with antibiotics. Some doctor for acne. I did have acne, and he puts me on antibiotics, which you find out later it kills the good bacteria in the gut, which destroys your immune system. But I actually was susceptible and got mono. I lost 20 pounds of weight in 2 weeks, and I was throwing up, getting sick, right? Just like the dream. And then after that, a year later, my mother's cancer came back and it took her.
Oh, wow.
And after that, my father lost it. My father was in the service during Nam. Like I said, he lost his father young. And I think this was the snapping point. And I remember at one point, my father said to me and my sister, he said, you know, life isn't worth living anymore. He goes, I'm going to get a gun. I'm going to shoot both of you in your sleep. I'm going to shoot myself.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was 19. My sister was 16. We would go to bed and we would check in with each other. Like we
lock
would
the damn
lock our
door.
doors at the same time.
Yeah, I'm about to say.
So think of the dream I had, and then to think of what happened 7 years later. And I didn't really remember the dream. I did, but I didn't reflect on it. But then I remember, like, about a little bit after that situation, that top point in my life, I thought back on the dream and I said, you know, that dream is pretty accurate to what happened 7 years later. You know, all the details. I was
about to ask you really quick. When that dream happened, how long do you think it was? Like, did it feel like it was like a whole day, or?
It felt like I lived it.
Oh,
you
wow.
know?
Yeah, that's usually how it is. Yeah.
I mean, it was probably like a few minutes, probably in reality, but it's one of those dreams, like it was a lucid dream, or you just feel like you're in it, so it seems so much longer.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask because a lot of people have these dreams and they feel like it's a lifetime. But yeah, go ahead.
No, it's all right. Yeah, so it's like and I thought about that. And I would never mess with the occult. I never touched a Ouija board. Like after that point, like I really learned. And I'll tell you some. Like I got some side stories for you. Quick side story. At the time, my neighbor Evelyn, who was big into metal, 2 years older than me, and I'll give you her story. Years later, I'm going to just throw a quick couple side ones in here to go along with the witchcraft and the occult and stuff. I think it was, let's give it, so she left, she moved out, I think it was about 1985. I think she moved out because I went to middle school, 85. She was there from 83, 85. Same as me, used to put the upside down crosses on her books, this and that, like nothing religious about it. My mother used to babysit for her, right? Facebook comes around. And of course, I didn't want to be on Facebook. My ex-wife got me on. And then after I started looking for some names, I was like, it's kind of nice talking to people you couldn't really find in real life. You could find on here. So I find Evelyn. Now, my farthest from religious this girl ever was. So she's friends on Facebook and she's posting about Jesus every day. Jesus this, Jesus that, verses by more than I think my mother would have, I was just amazed. So I had to inbox her. So I said to her, I go, hey, Ev, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Good. How you doing, Joe? I see all your religious posts. I said, my mom's smiling down from heaven on you, because she used to babysit. And, of course, mom would always teach everyone about Jesus and everything. But back then, she was not interested at all. She tells me this. And again, these aren't stories that you see on a channel on the internet. This is with people you could kind of judge better because you know who they are. She told me, she goes, Joe, you don't understand. Jesus saved me. And I go, well, yeah, he saved me too. He saved all of us. He died for our sins. She goes, no, Joe, Jesus saved me. She told me she ended up moving to California and joining the Church of Satan. Okay. Now, you see the interviews with these people from the church. It's always like, well, he's just a figurehead because he's rebellious, but we really don't believe in him. It's like, it's all a lie. Listen to me. It's all a lie. Dude, this is a church dedicated to the father of lies. So whatever they say, you can't believe. So she told me, she said, at first when she joined, she goes, she did animal sacrifice and human sacrifice and drank the blood of both. She said at first, she felt powerful. She goes, you call on these demons and they'll do anything for you. You want riches, they'll bring you riches. You want revenge, they'll get revenge for you. She goes, so in the beginning, she thought it was great. Then she said, eventually, they turn on you. And she said at one point, she was getting so bombarded by these demons that she was on her hands and knees and she cried out to Jesus Christ, please save me, Jesus. And she goes, they saved her. And she goes, from that point on, she's like, I owe God. He saved me. So that's a little wow. Insight into the Church of Satan. Whatever you see in the media, that's just publicity. It's charm, but it's not real.
Jeez, oh man, that's wild.
And like I said, Dominic, I don't know if he was familiar with the metal world, but this.
Oh yeah, he is.
Okay, so you know where I'm coming from. Like this is how we all work. Cause we didn't really know how serious it was.
My dad he could tell. He likes all that stuff.
Yeah, man. It was Judas Priest, 666, number of the bees, and like you were saying, Motley Crue, shout out the devil, and they said that they weren't worshiping the devil; they were shouting at him. It's the same thing, man. It's just, it's like whatever. But being young like that and so impressionable, with all their, their the way they flaunted themselves, the hair, the makeup, the leather outfits. I mean, yeah, it was cool at the time. I mean, the 80s, I can't lie, the 80s were a good time for me. But
it drew you in, yeah.
Yeah, but later, I started getting older, in my late teens. What made me open my eyes was one day I looked in the mirror and my face was turning like a lime green. And so I destroyed, specifically I destroyed that the Iron Maiden stuff.
Yeah.
It's really dark.
I don't blame you because I think there may be something more to it, even if they're not doing, because I've watched something where some guy said in the industry they do like spells over every acetate before they release them. So who knows? But I tell you, it was it's like this is where like all of us got led with the music, but we never, right? But we never took it that serious. We didn't think like we never worshiped the devil. We never be into that. But it's like you're opening doors that you don't realize you're opening. And I'll give you another story of my brother-in-law. Another story, swore till today, and I'll tell you, it's a funny thing. It wraps around to a YouTube video. My brother-in-law. Now, this is why I asked Dominic, if he remembers, back in the day, if you wanted to get real spell books, right, you couldn't just go to Barnes and Nobles or Borders Books or whatever. Over here in Jersey, you would have to go to the Village. All right, you have to go down to the Village in New York City and go to one of these oddball occult stores. My brother-in-law was down there, a couple of friends of ours, and he picks up what they call the Necronomicon. Now, the Necronomicon, from what I understand, is a two-piece book, okay? You have to cast spells or whatever. So now, listen, we all grew up poor. Like, we weren't rich, none of us. And so he figured, of course, what's the first one he's going to do is the find money spell, right? He casts the find money spell on the way to, school, the school bus, at the corner by his house, $5 bill, right? Picks it up, puts it in his pocket. He goes, it's probably coincidence. The next day, he casts the same spell. The day after, that day he did. The next day, he goes to school, $5 bill in the same exact spot. Now, like I said, I don't jump to, supernatural right away. So I asked him, I go, did you tell anybody you cast any spells? Because, we play jokes on each other. You guys know as kids, whatever. I'm like, maybe somebody dropped a $5 bill there just to, he goes, Dell, I never told anybody I was casting these spells. He goes, after that, he gave it to some kid in school. And he even said, like, he wasn't religious. We were kids who weren't religious, but he goes, you kind of know. He goes, it felt wrong. He goes, it felt wrong that I was getting money that way. And he gave up on it. And then a few years later, first, he's at somebody's house playing a board game innocently, and there's a bust. He had to pay $3,000 for a lawyer. Then he gets into a car accident, wipes out another car, right? Had to pay $3,000 for whatever he needed to do to get his license back or whatever. And to this day, he says, he goes, that's kind of funny that both times it cost me $3,000. He goes, I think it has something to do with that spell I cast. And he swore for years that he did, it worked or whatever. I was watching on YouTube. There was a video, some ex-Satanist guy, whatever, and he's telling the story about how he got into it. Now, this is some guy none of us even know, whatever. And he's talking about he did the find money spell, and it started off the same way it did with him. His story started just like my brother-in-law, Big Al, exactly the same, except he continued doing it. Eventually, he was finding rolled up money and a rubber band, whatever. I send him the video, and all he texts back is, he goes, see, Dell, I wasn't lying. So this isn't just coincidence. This is something, and let me just, before we jump back into my stories, whatever, I want to, one quick other side story by another friends with the Ouija board, because I want to get everything out there. I want to cover all planes so people understand selling your soul, Church of Satan, Ouija, witchcraft. From my experience, from people, this is all real. Friend of mine, he moves up to Vernon. All right, Vernon's, West New Jersey. It's, more of the hills, mountain, tree area. I go there the first time, and he's got a Ouija board nailed to his wall in his den. So I'm like, I go, Dom, I go, what's with the Ouija board nailed to your wall? He goes, that's so I know where it is at all times. So he tells me the story, which happens to go back, at that point in time, had to go back at least 13 years maybe. 15, 13 years. When he was in high school, him, a friend of ours, Charlie, God rest, and Charlie's girlfriend at the time, who ended up marrying Missy, a friend of theirs named Tony had passed away. So they wanted to talk to him. So they got the Ouija board, and they were using the Ouija board, and it was working. And this, quote unquote, Tony, and again, you know what the Bible says, you're not supposed to talk to the dead because, and this is why, because you're not talking to the dead. But people don't understand, there's a demon around you from the time of your birth. Like there's spirits that will see everything about you. So if I tell you a secret, right? Like if I'm like, hey, Lionel, Dominic, this is my secret. When I die, if somebody says it's me, a Ouija board, I'm going to use the word toilet bowl. You know what I mean? Nobody would think of it, and that's me. You'll know it's me. But even though I'm telling you, there's some spirit around us right now, and they'll just sit there and put the word toilet bowl out. I'm like, oh, hey, it's Joe. So the guy, Tony, that they thought they were talking to, they're using the board day after day, blah, blah, blah. Finally, one of them asked, where are you? And the Ouija board spelled out right behind you. They jumped. They took the Ouija board. They just called an end to it, and that was it. The next day or two, whatever, Missy comes home from school, and in her bedroom, the mirror that was behind the bureau was flipped upside down, leaning against her bed, with everything on the bureau in its place. Nothing moved.
Shit.
Charlie, and I'm getting goosebumps. I tell it, like I know these people, and I know they're not liars. Charlie, who didn't do drugs, didn't drink, right, got pulled over going up the Boulevard in Heights, which is the main street, the main drag. And the cop pulls him over. He goes, you know why I'm pulling you over? And he's like, no, why? He goes, you were driving down the wrong side of the road. Okay? Completely sober and straight. Dominic, after that happened, he hands it to a friend of his and goes, listen, he goes, get rid of this. He goes, I forgot which friend it was. He goes, where? He goes, I don't care. He says, get rid of this thing, right? A couple years later, he's cleaning out his closet. The Ouija board's in there.
Oh, hell no.
He calls up his friend. He goes, I thought I told you to get rid of this thing. He says, I did. He goes, why is it in my closet? He goes, I have no idea. So he took the board to some dumpster somewhere out and to get rid of it, and it showed up again.
It burned the damn
That's
thing.
why it was nailed on his wall, because he was so tired of it, like scaring him in like a closet or something. This way he knows if it's on the wall, he knows where it is.
I don't know why people just don't burn it. They'll smash them in those situations.
That's, yeah, I guess, but people that we're not, my generation isn't hip to that. You got to remember, this is pre-internet. This is, you know what I mean? This is where all we knew is from what we were taught. And the churches were not giving us like the heads up on this stuff. But if you don't mind, I'm going to delve back into the house.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
There's a lot to go on with that house. So when I was in 7th grade, now I already stated that, as I knew, it was an open lot. My father used to play stickball, football with his friends until everybody bought up, the plots of land and built houses. It was a 100-year anniversary for Lodi. It was 1986, 85, 86, somewhere around there. Miss Bartizel was my teacher at the time, and she brought a map in of Lodi and was going to tell everybody what was where they lived 100 years before. I thought it'd be real fun, So, one kid, oh, yours was a milk farm. Oh, yours was a produce farm. Oh yeah, at one point your place was this or that, whatever she got to. And she gets to me, she asked my address. And I was like, yeah, I'm like 119 Westervelt, I'm like right across the street. She looks down at the map, she looks up at me, and she has this look on her face. She goes, Joe, do you really want to know what it was? And I was like, yeah. She goes, it was a cemetery. She goes, does that bother you? And I looked at her, I said, no, but it answers a lot of questions. So I didn't know until I was 12 years old. And I don't think my family even knew, because it was just an open plot of land. Because, by the time the families got here, whatever, from Italy, so you're going back 100 years. So that was before, I guess, my family was even in America. So we didn't know that. So the fact that it was on a cemetery, and again, going to my aunt, like, I'm wondering if she did something in there just to really incite whatever was causing the weird occurrences in that house,
Yeah.
But there's I got like I said, another story, like my mother. Now, she was Sicilian, and anybody knows Sicilian women, they're religious and they're very strict as mothers. She never lied. Women would never lie, fib, say anything to him. Most down to earth person you probably meet. And she beat me and my sister into telling the truth. So, we told a lie, it was like the worst thing. Punished, grounded, and we got hit. So one night, now, when I fast forward, I'm in high school, right? Now, you remember, you're teenager, you're hanging out with your friends. Sometimes you do a little drinking, a little smoking, you come home. So I'd come home, midnight, 2 in the morning, whatever. And I'd just go on the couch and just put some Pink Floyd on and crash or whatever I would do. So my mother wouldn't sleep in the bed with my father. Now, years later, kind of put 2 and 2 together. He was, he went in the service during Nam. They were trained to snap someone's neck out of a dead sleep. So, knowing my father and the way he worried, he probably was worried that he was going to do that to my mother. So my mother would sleep on the couch. So I told my mother, I said, Ma, I go, you know what? Sleep in the bedroom. I go, sleep in my bedroom. I go, sleep in my bed. Sleep in a real bed. I said, I'll sleep on the couch. No worries. And she's like, you sure, Joseph? Yeah, sure. One day, she comes up to me. And like I said, out of character for my mother, and she says, Joseph, I saw something odd in your bedroom last night. I was like, yeah, what'd you see, Ma? Your floor was glowing orange. I was like, Ma, it's the alarm clock. Because I think I had my alarm clock on the floor, and it was the old digital one with those red numbers rather. And I was like, she goes, Joseph, I'm in that room every night. She goes, I know what the floor looks like. She goes, your floor was glowing orange. I go, well, what'd you do? I got up, I went to the bathroom, and then I came back in and just went back to bed. Mom was from Bensonhurst, so she didn't scare easy. But I told her, I said, Ma, I go, why didn't you wake Dad up and me and Jennifer, like, so we could see, She goes, well, your father has to get up for work and your kids have to get up for school. You needed your sleep. And I'm like, Ma, the floor's glowing orange. I go, we could lose one night of sleep. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's wild. Like an LED light underneath the carpet. What do you mean?
All she said, I tried getting more detail. All she kept saying, it was glowing orange. And that's all she would say. There was no, and we didn't have LED. I don't think we have LEDs.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't think. Yeah, but I'm just trying to see like an idea of what this is.
Yeah, like the perception of what it would look like. Yeah, I no idea. She really didn't go into detail with that. And again, like that came from my mother, she was not like we're interested into like some of the odd supernatural stuff. Mom wasn't like that, She, like I said, very religious, she was a true Christian woman, would help the elderly in the town and all. And it's like, it was just out of character for her. So I never forgot that either. But, it was, let me see if I could get some other things, if I could recollect. Oh, another weird thing that happened once, and this is something that's a wrap around to a future time. I was managing a record store. I started working at a record store in Lodi, back when I was 15. By the time I was 18, I was managing it. I had the keys to the door. It was in a place called Dollar Video. And, again, it said like, I always joke to say like my aunt and Glenn Danzig is the one that brought all the demons into Lodi, because Lodi has always been known to just have a lot of bad happening in there. But the other misfits are Christians. I remember Jerry would come in. He dropped off his cassettes, the Christ the Conqueror. He became a Christian. Doyle come in, Bobby Steele, like all the misfits would come in, bring their things, whatever. But and one day, I opened up. I was opening and closing. It was probably a weekend. I couldn't find my keys. I'm like, where are my keys? I can't find them. I call my mother up. I mean, I searched everywhere. Like usually they were on my pocket. I had one of those leather straps that would go around the belt buckle. Couldn't find my keys. And I mean, it was a small store. It was embedded in a video store. So it wasn't like there was much territory to go over. And I called up the boss. He goes, listen, just lock up. He goes, I'll come tomorrow morning with the key, a spare key. And I called my mother. I had spare keys for the car at the time. She brought my spare keys. I drove home. So never found the keys. Long after my mother had died, my father had died, and we were cleaning up the house because the house was, going to get sold or whatever. I go at the top drawer in the kitchen. It was a set of 3 drawers, stacked above each other next to the refrigerator, like off to the right-hand corner, And I'm cleaning out this drawer. It was the junk drawer. You found everything, screwdrivers, pocket change, whatever. All the way in the back of the drawer were the keys. Even with the little key for the little lock for the record store. In the back of the drawer.
Well, that sounds like a demon trying to irritate you. I've had those situations happen to me.
And I got goosebumps. And I couldn't believe, because you remember, that drawer, you're putting a decade plus between the point in times. I was in that drawer many times. There was many times I had to dig through there for something or screw, whatever I need. They were never in there. How did those keys show up? Whatever, I would say father died 13, 14, 15 to 17 years later, those keys show up in that drawer.
Wow.
But after they were lost. So
it's a trickster demon, man.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I actually wrote a song when I was in my first band, Spectrum Green, is called The Jester. And the lyrics are based around that, believe it or not, even, because I wasn't really, hip to this yet. But I always felt I called him the Jester, which was some type of entity that followed me around and always screwed things up for me, because everything would always tend to like go wrong. And I felt like there was something like that there. So yeah, Dom, you know what? Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's some type of familiar spirit following you around. Probably part of that house. It sounds like the house is just inundated with these specters, and that place. Yeah, doesn't sound like a good place to live.
Well,
Obviously, something there happened many years ago before that place was even built.
yeah, that's why when we moved out, I was moving from a full house into an apartment with my first wife, and I was relieved. I honestly was relieved because that house, it always like with my band, like people would come over, people would like my old bass player from Sleepy Hollow, his girlfriend at the time, his girlfriend's mother told me because she didn't want to say anything because she thought it'd be insulting to me. She's like, yeah, she's like, Shannon didn't want to say nothing, but she says like she gets this real dark, eerie feeling from your house. And I go, I'm not offended. I go, trust me, I know. There's been a lot of weird. I'll give you another one. I mean, I could. I'm going to try to get the more substantial ones into the story. When I was about 25 years old, I hooked up with a waitress, and I brought her back to the house. We were drinking a little, whatever, and I brought her into the jam room. What happened was my sister got married at one point. I was at the time I was 23, so we took her old bedroom, and we turned it into the jam room. It was where we jammed, and I brought this waitress back, and we're hanging in the bedroom. Then all of a sudden, it was like she was possessed, and she started like saying weird things. She's like, "Oh, I don't want to do this to you. I don't want to do." And like we were getting romantic. It's round and second just to keep it vague. And all of a sudden, she starts like punching my chest, hitting me, acting weird. And then she's like, I held her, like, I didn't know, like, I wasn't, I was just like, I just started praying. I'm like, God, I don't know what's going on, but please, just stop this, And as I'm holding her, she's scratching my back and tearing into my back. And, I did nothing to her. I just was praying. And at one point, like, she's sitting in a chair that was in there. So I'm like, I'm trying to put socks on. I'm like, all right, time to go, And she started arching her back up. Her tongue was coming out of her mouth. It was making sounds like The Exorcist. Like she was making these weird sounds. Like it was just so odd.
Holy shit.
And eventually I got her into the bed. I had to do a record show the next day, like real early. So I got maybe about 20 seconds worth of sleep. Oh, we got to go now. I'll take you home. I told her I'd bring her home from work the next day. Picked her up, brought her home. She's like, "What?" She goes, "When we going out on our next date?" I go, "We're not."
Never.
She's like, "Why not?" I lifted up my shirt and showed her. I had bruises and scratches everywhere. She goes, "I did that to you?" I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "I don't even remember doing that. I'm sorry." And it was in the jam room, the same room where my sister was, where, she tried hanging herself. So I think that's why I always question if it was my aunt that did something, because that room always generated this like really, this odd, just weird things. Like in Sleepy Hollow, a quick thing, like I said, I always think logic first. I thought they were joking on me. We got finished practicing. Equipment stayed there. It was the jam room. We're all in the kitchen. Me, my bass player, drummer, guitar player, getting drink, snack, whatever. All the equipment's turned off. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with a Hammond organ, but a Hammond organ could be used percussively if you slap it. Like you could do like a lot of reggae does that kind of sound. And it's just, we're leaving the kitchen. My bass player in front of me, I'm behind him. I think Mole, my guitar player, was behind me, and Noodles was the drummer behind him. And we're walking in a queue, and we hear this like somebody was hitting the organ. And nobody reacted right away. Then I just went to Dan. I said, "Did you hear that?" He looks at me and he goes, "Yeah, I heard that." He goes, "I thought it was just me. You heard that too?" I was like, "Yeah." And then I'm like, and first I'm thinking joke, like I'm going, you guys are playing a joke on me. You recorded it and you put it in the stereo. So I go right to the stereo in the living room and check to see there's a cassette in the player, and there was nothing in there. And I'm like, what the heck caused that? So I go in there just to check the keyboard. Everything was off. So for it to make that sound, like you would need the actual keyboard itself on. It has to run through a preamp into an amp. You know what I mean? To set off that sound and have someone strike the keys at the same time. And then as they're leaving, they start like they're giggling a little. I'm like, you guys played a joke on me. I'm like, how'd you do that? They're like, we didn't play a joke on you. I'm like, why are you guys laughing then? And Dan looks at me and goes, because we don't have to sleep here tonight.
Oh, shit.
So, and that's another instance, like, where it wasn't just, me, multiple people heard something that was odd.
That's wild.
And I want to throw a quick side story in again. Back to 84, there's a blackout in New Jersey. When there was blackouts, parents would let me and my sister stay up late for whatever reason. Middle of summer, we're in the backyard. This is an offshoot. It doesn't have to do with the house, or maybe it does. We're in the backyard, 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, keep in mind, when there's a blackout, all planes are down. You can't, the runways, the lights are out, can't land planes or whatever. We're in the backyard looking up, and all of a sudden, this glowing light floats over our house in the backyard, goes down a few blocks, I would assume, and then just goes back the other way, smoothly, right? And we're all looking at it, and I thought that was odd. The next day, my buddy Smokey lived across the street, his nickname. We grew up together since we were like in the crib. So I don't like feeding people information either, because sometimes like they'll go along with something because, they're like, oh yeah, I saw it too, So I just ask. I try to fish for an answer. So the next day we're hanging out. I was about 11 years old. He was 12 probably. About same age. Actually, we're both probably 11 at the time. And I asked him, I go, hey, what'd you guys do last night? No, we stayed up. Same thing with them. They were allowed to stay up when it was a blackout. I said, where were you hanging out? He's like, up in the attic. Now, in the attic, like, it would be across the street, and the attic window would be on the opposite side of our street. It'd be facing, east, where I was, like, west from their house. So I asked him, I go, Smoke, did you see anything odd last night while you were looking out the window? He's like, nah, not really. He goes, Dad, it was this light. This light went over, it looked like it went over the house, and then a few seconds later went back over. So he even saw it too, this flying light orb thing. And this is 84. Like, this is, back in the day where the occurrences were very rare. But I just wanted to throw that out there too, that's another weird occurrence.
That is weird. Whatever that was, it sounds like that's what turned the lights off too.
Maybe. That's very possible, because it didn't make a sound. It was just a glowing light. It just looked like just a white light in the sky. That's
right. Down to Dominic's alley. He sees those things like like automatically.
Yeah, man. These orbs, I see them. I see them quite a lot. But they're like, last ones I seen, they're kind of like translucent, like a light orange. A lot of people say because they're in this dimension and half in their dimension, so they're not quite solid, but they're like I don't like see-through, really weird stuff. But I think all those have to do with demonic forces, the powers and principalities, Satan's of the air.
Yep.
So I think but what's going on in your house? I want to ask this question.
Sure.
Were there any like like statues you guys had, drawings, anything? Because a lot of these demons can inhabit a statue, a doll, a drawing, and they can manifest out of these objects. And a lot of these statues that talk or move or bleed blood or cry, whatever, those are called teraphim in the Bible. And they are real. And it depends on what's happened in that house, what happened before, what happened on that land. I mean, we don't know. I mean, it could go all the way back to the ancient times, the Native Americans. Maybe there was a burial ground there, and maybe later a cemetery, or a lot of these things happen in these areas. They're charged with these unsettled demonic dark spirits.
100% agreed. I mean, it's like I said, that area, like, it was a cemetery, so that I was told. And I remember there was also a story, my neighbor, the Cilientos, a lightning bolt went through the window and struck Mr. Ciliento's son at one point, which is another odd thing, that happened in that area. Which when I got married to my first wife, when I was seeing her, we ended up moving into the house for a bit before it got sold. And I remember being the first time I was telling her about all the stuff that I'm telling you guys. We were in the backyard, right? Sitting, there was of course, the porch or whatever, concrete porch. And I'm sitting next to her. It's the middle of the night, and we're talking. I was telling her all the stories, the weird stuff, everything I've already told. all of a sudden I feel pinching all over my back and chest. And I'm like, what the? I flipped the outside light on. I pull my shirt off. There had been 100 ants biting me all over. I didn't have any type of cologne on. I didn't have any type of suntan lotion, nothing. But as soon as I started talking about what was going on in that house to her and the look on her face, she's like, there's not one ant on me. And it didn't start until you started telling me those stories. And it hit her. Like, it really, I'm getting goosebumps again, just telling it, because I remember it. It's like vividly. And when we were in the house, now we were there, my father was dying. You know, this is going to go back to 2005, where my father, he had, you know, a lot of things going on, and he was dying. He was sent to hospice, you know. And my grandmother was downstairs, you know, she was elderly. And we were redoing the house because at this point, I think, you know, I don't know if he was in the hospital and we were repainting. Like, we just wanted to make the place nice for him for, you know, whatever time he had left. And weird stuff started happening. Like, and she remembers, she's like, yeah, like, you know, paint buckets turning upside down. We'd find in the foyer. And one day we were painting the bathroom, right? And again, I just logic, reason, whatever. We're in the bathroom and we hear crash bang. Right? Whatever we heard, I'm like, what the? I run in my father's bedroom. He's sleeping. I run downstairs to my grandmother. She's in the chair, in her, you know, the living room chair, rocking chair, sleeping. I'm like, what was that noise? I go into the foyer. There was this orb that covers the light. The orb had the you know, the casing, which was at least, I would have to say, 1/4 inch thick. Had to be old. It was there before I was there. A piece of it cracked off and fell. Like, I'm talking probably about 1/6 to 1/7 of it broke off and fell out of nowhere in the foyer. Then I'm trying to think other things. I know at that time the printer started going on its own, which would creep out my wife. She always brings that up. She used to feel these cold feelings in the hallway, and it was building. You know, the weird stuff that was happening, and I told my father, and my father, you know, he's the type to just laugh things off, whatever. And he's like, oh, that was me. He goes, wait till you see what I do next. And he ended up back in the hospital. So it was just me and my ex-wife sleeping in my old bedroom, right? And this is a build-up to something here, guys. There's a big build-up. So about it was 2:45 in the morning, right? I wake up, I look at the clock, the lights are on in the bedroom, and she's sitting there staring at the wall facing the foyer. And I look at her, I'm like, it's 2:45 in the morning. What are you doing? And she has this look of fright on her face, and she says, you didn't hear that? I'm like, hear what? And then all of a sudden, I hear scratching against the other side of the wall.
Oh, shit.
And I look at her, I go, I heard that. Now, we had 2 cats. First thing, maybe it's a cat. Like, you have to weed out all the logic first before you jump to that. One cat's in my father's room on the windowsill. The other cat's in the bathroom on the windowsill. So, I mean, I jumped up and went out quick. So there's no way those cats just happened to be, they were properly situated there, like, you know. So I went in there. I opened the door. Remember, we cleaned everything out. We fixed it. Nothing in there. And I specifically heard scratching on the other side of the wall. All right. So eventually my father had passed away. My grandmother passed away. I want to make sure before I get to the crux of this all that I'm not forgetting any other stories I wanted to tell. I think I got pretty much a good number of the major ones I can remember. So my buddy Dominic gets me to go back to church. Starts to go. I haven't gone to church at this point in probably 15 years at least. And he starts going to church in Sparta, small church, good pastor, like real deep, you know, like he was filled with the Spirit. Like I went up there and I remember, you know, like I prayed to God, actually. You know, I went there. I thought it was a good sermon, and he hit a lot of things. I had questions for years. So I asked God, I prayed to myself, not telling anybody else. I said, Father, I said, listen, you know, I don't want to sin, but I also, if I could enjoy myself down here, I want to do what I'm allowed to do, you know, like how far can I get close to that line without going over and sinning? And I just prayed it to myself, whatever. That Sunday, this pastor, God rest, he's gone to be with our Lord. he's praying, and out of nowhere, he's like, wait a minute, the Holy Spirit's telling me somebody here prayed this week about sinning and going over a line. And he's acting like he's standing by a line, teetering, and he goes, the Holy Spirit's telling me to tell this person. And meanwhile, there's like 8 people there. He's like, the Holy Spirit's telling me to tell people, tell this person, don't get close to that line. You're human. You'll go over and sin. And I blew my mind because I'm like, I never told anybody I prayed that, and I really felt like the Holy Spirit was speaking through this man, because it couldn't even be a demon either, because it was, like I said, I prayed to the Lord. That was it, in silence in my room. So I was getting into the good book again, So one day I'm sitting there reading the Bible, and I found a beautiful verse or whatever, and my ex-wife comes by. I go, hey, check this out. And I read this verse, and she explodes on me in the hallway where I did those symbols, the occult symbols, the same. But she's like, MFer, why are you reading? I don't care about this S and blah, 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 and swearing a storm. I mean, exploding, spitting and everything. And this is where I learned to use the name of Jesus to get these demons out. In the name of Jesus, Satan be gone. I looked at her. Now, this is use logic and reason. And anybody who's married will confirm. This, if it was them really doing it out of their own will, this ain't going to work. And I just looked up her. I said, in the name of Jesus, Satan be gone. With conviction, all of a sudden, it was like she just calmed down immediately and then turned in the direction she was going and continued walking. Like nothing happened.
Wow.
Just from using the Lord's name. So this is where I'm building up to. And this is something that was just, this was it. It was like a movie. It was like a movie. This is why it just doesn't even sound believable, because I could be writing a movie right now, but this really happened. All this stuff builds up to this. We were sleeping in the living room. For some reason, we had a mattress in there. That's where we decided to stay while we were still staying there until the house got sold. About 3 o'clock in the morning, we fell asleep. Lights were on. TV was on. The room was bright as could be. You can't be hallucinating anything. She's to my left. I'm to the right. I wake up with every hair on the back of my neck on end. I just felt something evil. I rolled over, and as I'm rolling over, I say, in the name of Jesus, Satan be gone. Because it was a gut reaction to this. As I rolled over, I saw something like I've never seen in a horror movie, nothing that's been described to me, and it's not even something that's descriptive in the Bible. It looked like a black hole. I would guess 5 foot wide, 3 foot high, give or take, like this. It looked like the absence of matter. And there it was, to the left of us. And as I was rolling over and saying it, it floated over me and my ex-wife. As it went over her, like right now, every hair is on end again. She started mumbling in her sleep, but it wasn't English. And I don't even think it was a language. It sounded like, and then when it wasn't over her anymore, she stopped talking, and then it went over me, and it went through the right wall. I was wide awake. I could not fall asleep the rest of that night. It finally showed itself, whatever was in that house my whole life. And at this point, I think I was about 33, maybe, at 33, 34 at the time, give or take. The next day, I went online. I ordered Alexander Scorby Reads the Bible, and me and her went to bed to that every night until we left that house.
Holy shit. Man, that's wild. I don't even know what to say. I never heard that before either. Just like a box of empty space floating around. That's crazy.
It looked like, I'd say maybe a cloud. I can't. It was like a piece of like time and space was ripped apart in this area. I can't even explain. Like a black hole. Like it's just empty. Like you couldn't see through it either. When it went over us, it wasn't like a cloud. It was no. Like it was like the best way you could describe it was an absence of matter. And I remember watching after that. There was a documentary on Black Sabbath. Now Geezer Butler's a Christian. Okay, but he was, back when Sabbath first started, he was into the occult or whatever. And he was telling a story, like this song Black Sabbath, figure in black, which points at me, blah, 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 blah. So he's telling the story that like Ozzy bought him some occult book or whatever. He got into it, whatever. And Geezer's like, he goes, yeah, I woke up in the middle of the night and there's this black thing was at the foot of my bed. He goes, I can't explain it. It was just this black thing. He's like, I nearly asked myself. And the way he described it, I'm like, it almost sounds like a vertical version of what I saw. Like, and this is after this happened to me, and I was like, you can't describe it. Like, it was just, but the feeling you got from it, I woke up from a dead sleep and I felt it. And it was pure evil. Pure evil. There was nothing holy about whatever that thing was at all. At all.
Wow. I don't even know.
Sounds like a gateway.
I was about to say, like something
Right.
wanted to come in or pull in.
Yeah, some kind of gateway or some kind of roving event horizon.
I don't
Hole.
I don't know. I mean, as far as I know, that could have been the demonic spirit itself. You know?
Yeah, it could be.
We
That's
only
pretty crazy.
we draw them artistically, horns and whatever, but like it was something that, like I said, it was never described to me, never seen before, but that was the pinnacle. And then after that, soon after we moved out, and I'll tell you a quick side story of the band. I forgot another one I should have put out there when it was the band. Another thing that happened odd, which I hate throwing a story in, but I wanted that to be the end. But this loops into something else, which is odd. But and there's footage of it. I got, I don't really do my YouTube channel. I just put some of the music up for whoever people want to see. And there's a rehearsal that was recorded in '99 before we ever, started, recording or playing out. And this was odd. We were doing, the regular set list, and it's on this video. That's what I put it up for. And at one point, Dan picks up the camera to film me, and it looks like I'm in this trance-like state. All I'm doing is staring right in front of me, and I'm playing this weird music on the piano. And if you watched it, it's like, I'm doing this weird thing. We're supposed to go into this next song, whatever. I'm waiting for a count off, and I just go into this weird thing with this piano music, and it's not my style, nothing I've ever done or ever would do. And then all of a sudden, my guitar player is like, "Hey," and it's like I snapped out of a trance. And as soon as he says, "Hey," I start playing the song we were supposed to play. Like, if you see the timing on it, it's like you couldn't done it on purpose. And I thought that was weird. And the funny thing is, to loop in to the next story, they kind of intertwine. Once I moved out, we'd finished the album Legend, and we moved, and I freelanced. I was going to, I was like, all right, Mole moved to Colorado, and, we did our 4 albums, and we did pretty decent, By 2013, we had like 1.9 million hits on the website, which actually impressed people that were like on major labels. And, sold, thousands, a few thousands of records, whatever. We did decent. We're pretty big for underground, let's put it that way. And I was like, I'm a freelance. So I get a call from Pat, who's, ended up, doing the Metal Hall of Fame years later, but he was going to do a project on BMG Sony. And he wanted me, like, he asked if I could, transpose the music, because his last name is Gesualdo. His ancestor's Carlo Gesualdo, who is an Italian composer, and the BMG and Sony both wanted the project where they transpose it to a rock band or whatever. So I ended up doing that, and I end up getting into, when I'm transposing the music, I end up getting into a car accident. Now, there's a lot of oddity revolving around that car accident. Now, it's kind of a trilateral circumference around the incident, because one, me transposing this guy's music, and I'll explain that in a second. 2, it happened on a day I was in church asking God to let me see. I was asking the good Lord. I was going to a church near me now. I was in Garfield, and I was, communing with the Lord at the time. And I said, because I had a lot bad go in my life. And I said, Father, please show me that my loved ones are in heaven, that heaven exists, my loved ones are waiting for me, and it's worth going through what we go through down here to get to the kingdom your son spoke of. And the day in church, people came to talk to me, very polite. And I said, listen, I'm not being rude, but I'm communing with, with the Lord now. And I if you talk to me, I'll probably not pay attention. And people were very understanding about it. And they're like, we understand, Joe, it's okay. And 4 hours later, I got into this car accident and I saw the afterlife. I saw everybody who died visiting me in the hospital. Everybody looked 23 years old. And the feeling I felt was peace and love. They were coming up to the bed. Their lips didn't move, but I could feel them saying, "Hi, Joe. Good to see you, Joe." And my ex-wife told me in the real world, the material, the physical realm, she said that all I kept saying for 24 hours was, "What happened? Was it my fault? Was my wife at me?" For 24 hours straight. The first question that deviated from that was, is my father still alive? And she told me, she responded, I don't remember this. She told me, she goes, no, he died. And then I asked, but my cousin Michael, he died. And then I got to my friend Tony Deese, and she's like, I said I got a little argumentative. I was like, no, he was here. He's just visited me. He's not dead. And then when I got to my mother, she said she got nervous. She said, she thought to herself, what is he seeing? His mom's been dead 18 years. And I was questioning because I was transitioning from the spirit world back to the physical, and I guess I was confused because I seen all these people, but I thought they were visiting me in the hospital, like they should be alive. And the only point where I came out of that was when I was being examined. I was blind. I couldn't even see. I just heard a doctor say, he broke his neck, he broke his C2. I said, Doc, if I'm going to be paralyzed, let me die. And he goes, you're not going to be paralyzed. And I said, Doc, if I'm going to be paralyzed, let me die. Because I knew it was waiting. I saw what's waiting. Like, I didn't want to be here in a wheelchair when I could be there in paradise, And he's like, you're not going to be paralyzed. And after that, I went back to seeing everybody who died visiting me, And I remember people like my great Aunt Frances died at 96, looked 23. My one grandmother died at 96, looked 23. My mother, father, friends, everybody was there. And they just, it was like, but everybody I remember seeing and everybody I mentioned had all been dead. So I don't think it was my brain making up stuff, because if it was, it'd be intertwined. It'd be the living and the dead, and and it was perfect. Everybody that I met, and she knew because from what I said to her, and I don't even remember that. So I got my answer, and to this day, when I hear the story when Jacob wrestled with God, the angel of God, and then at the end he touched his hip and he had to walk with that limp, because he wrestled with God, I chuckle and I get a little teary-eyed, because I'm like, that's kind of what I did. Because, I kind of wrestled with God because life was so heavy on me by that point. I was like, I got tired. I was like frustrated. I was like, God, show me this. Show me this exists. I'm like, this is enough. And he allowed me to see it, of course, unfortunately by the hands of the devil, because God's love. God can never hurt us, but he'll allow only so, like the same with Job, do what you want, but you can't kill him, So, and I know the hand of God was there, because 4 months later, when I saw the x-ray, I was in a halo vest for 3 months. Then I was in a Miami J collar, and then they were doing x-rays to make sure whatever. And I looked at the x-ray. Now, at the time, I thought when I heard I had a displaced fracture, I'm thinking just a piece of the vertebrae broke off, chip, whatever. I saw the white line, which appears on an x-ray where a break is. It'll appear as a brighter white line. It hugged the spine. I looked back at my doctor. I was like, it hugs the spine. And he smirked and he goes, yeah, you came close. I was informed pretty much I could have sneezed and died in the hospital. That's how close it was. And I believe that was God's way of showing, listen, I'm in control. I got you, but you got your answer, but I had to pay for it. And I've given it my testimony to many people. That's helped many people in many different situations, which I'm grateful for. But I still suffer the physicals, but that'll be gone when I get my new body. But yeah. Wow. And the third part to the accident, which was really odd, and this is something where I'm gonna veer off a little just to make the point. after I moved out, I started getting very much into a lot with conspiracies and a lot, getting deeper into the whole spiritual thing, especially after what I experienced and being told about 9/11, could have been inside job, this and that. I ended up watching a lot of the old, conspiracy videos. I was getting very adamant about it, how, everything's being set up for the Antichrist. Blah, 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 blah. I get a phone call, and this was 2 weeks before my accident. Hi, this is so-and-so from the Katie Couric show. And for anybody who doesn't know, out here on the East Coast, Katie Couric used to be a news anchor, and then she had her own show at one time. It was a morning show. And the voice on the other side of the line said to me, hey, we're looking to, we're doing a survey. Would you mind answering a few questions? And back in them days, I was pretty opinionated. I wasn't afraid to give an opinion and all. I was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then every question, which was odd for Katie Couric, because she's not really political. She was more of the, hey, so-and-so's coming on and cooking a filet today. He'll teach you how to cook it, kind of show. And it was asking what I thought of Obama. What did I think of the Tea Party? All these odd questions that were very more geared to someone who is looking a little deeper than what they were being told by the media and public figures. And she finally asked me, she goes, if you could change one thing about America, about the United States, what would it be? I said, the Federal Reserve Bank. The Federal Reserve Bank shouldn't even exist. We shouldn't have a central bank. And I went on with the whole thing, and you guys know, because you guys are probably hip with, what I'm talking about. And she said, well, thank you very much, sir. The results of the survey will be on Wednesday's show. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Boop, done. Try finding that. My car accident was March 27th, 2011. Try to find some Katie Couric shows a week or two before that. They had nothing on it, anything to do with that survey at all. And at the time of the accident, it was 3 o'clock in an afternoon, and I was going to get gas. I came home from church. From what I was told, I talked to my landlord a little. It was an old friend of mine. And my wife was on the computer doing something with Facebook, and I was like, would go to my mother-in-law's house in Bergenfield, which was northeast of where we lived in Lodi. So I figured, I was always very prolific as you know what, I'll go get gas. Well, while you do your thing, and we'll come back. We'll go to your mom's. That's what happened, and I got hit. The 2 police officers that were at the scene were childhood friends of mine, and one of them told me that he thought they were going to pull a dead body out of the car. I was driving a Cadillac. She hit me at 60 miles per hour, T-boned my Caddy, wrapped it around a tree. My head went through the windshield. My hair was like the picture showed my hair ripped out in that windshield. And he said, when we got you out, he goes, I was relieved. He goes, and he was on the police force at the time for about 22 years. He goes, this was the worst accident I have ever seen. So I know I should be dead. But the odd thing about this girl was she was 22 years old, had a 2-year-old in the back seat, and she had her cell phone somewhere in the front seat. She doesn't even understand why she was going in that direction, because she came from Union, which is south of Lodi, and she already dropped off her brother. So en route going back to Union, should have been heading south, and she was heading dead north when she hit me. Now, I'm going to go into conspiracy world for a tad here, but my ex-wife, her old boss used to be in the military. He was a military doctor, MD. He went down to the Pentagon for a meeting because he was very much against using mercury in the inoculations, which they claim to be, a preservative, which if anybody in Dominic probably remembers, the old mercury thermometers, you crack them open, they turn into little balls.
Yeah.
So, yeah, right? Like, there's no way that thing's going to preserve anything. It's with its own context. But my far-fetched theory, which, again, talking on a cell phone or flying in an airplane might sound far-fetched in 1900, but, like, I think what they've been doing is, I think the mercury, which is liquid metal, is a computer chip. And I think that they're putting in the inoculations in the young kids, and they're lodging, it's meant to lodge in their brain to control them. Because there's a video, if you look it up, where they put this chip in a cockroach's brain, and some guy sits there with a remote control and moves the cockroach's arms, legs, whatever, because of the chip in its brain. If they could do it to a cockroach, why can't they do it to a human? And again, why are they putting this mercury in these inoculations? And I think that has something to do with it, because they call it causing autism. Now, that's why the doctor went down for the meeting, because he feels like it was causing autism. But that's not even real autism, because I know some of my friends who had kids with the quote-unquote autism. My cousin, who's older than us, I think he's probably in his 60s now, early 60s, has the real autism, where one part of the brain's a lot stronger, but the other side's a lot weaker, where he still memorizes everybody's license plate from the 70s. But, he's very weaker when it comes to other things. These kids just couldn't talk. Like they go, that's high spectrum or low spectrum autism, blah, 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 blah. Hey, listen, they can call whatever they want. I think it's brain damage. I think it's that mercury, and I think that mercury is a chip, and I think that's what happened with that girl that day, because I think they were trying to take me out. And as far-fetched as that sounds, listen, I'm not Michael Jackson or Prince or anybody that level, but I am in the entertainment industry. I was getting a lot of, there's a good number of people where I had a voice to. And if I would have done that tour with that project, I'm sure it would have just went a lot further. But that's something I think about. And it's far-fetched, it's speculation. I'm not saying I believe it, but it was odd that this girl was doing 60 with a 2-year-old in the back seat, which what mother is going to drive that erratic with their 2-year-old child in the back seat? And she was going in the wrong direction. And the police officer told me she was confused, because she goes, I never even come up this far. So it might sound far-fetched. And not only that, the devil knows I'm a true Christian. Like, I'm hardcore. Like, and Dominic knows, us metalheads from the 80s, like, we're not posers. Like, we're as loyal as we were when it came to the music. We probably make some of the best Christians these days, believe it or not, even though it's, the music's dubbed in an evil way. But
I agree.
We're loyal Christians. And so that's what happened that day. And that's my testimony with that. But the other odd thing, which is going to revert back to that video from 99. This was 2010. Okay, now 2011 at the point when I'm transposing this guy's music. Okay, it was 3 violins, which was tedious, because if anybody knows music, three to try to distinct 3 separate violins on one track is it's a little bit challenging. But that's all I knew. I wrote the sheet music down, this and that, right? I really didn't know much of this guy. So a few years later, through the Metal Hall of Fame. It was called the Hall of Heavy Metal History, the first one. So I came out to help. I ran the first one, whatever. And quick funny side story. One of the guys was this guy, Mickey D. Played drums for King Diamond. Like, as Dominic knows, King Diamond was one of the original, he's probably the godfather of like Satan metal or whatever. Mickey D used to tour with him. Now, King Diamond's been known to do seances and weird stuff, whatever. I was telling Mickey D the story about, the thing I saw in the old house and this and that. He looked at me with fear and went, oh, you got to move out of there. And it's like, wow, if the guy who played drums for King Diamond's getting spooked by my story, I know it's got to be a good one. But what do you call it? So we were there with a couple DJs from England. They were one Steve, who passed away actually a few weeks ago, God rest, and Whitney. And, they're interviewing, Pat, whatever, the owner of the hall. And I'm just hanging out, whatever. And I'm going, hey, tell him about your ancestor. Tell him about your ancestor, the guy's music who was transposing, right? So he starts telling, which I didn't know, that this guy, this Carlo Gesualdo guy, was he ended up murdering his, supposedly still got the mattress with the blood on it. He murdered his wife and his wife's lover, and he lived in this castle, and he was this rich dude, and he's telling all these stories, and I'm going, really? This is what this guy was like? I thought it was just like a Bach or a Beethoven, you know what I mean? Little eccentric, but that's it. I went home after we got back from California, and I looked up this guy, Carlo Gesualdo. Apparently, the whole town thought this man was possessed by Satan himself, not even demon possessed. So on top of the whole stack of things, I'm transposing music from some guy that people assumed was possessed by Satan. So I start looking up his music, and all this links together. I didn't think of that video that I had. It was still on VHS at the time. And he's known for what they call dissonant progressions, which means it's the stuff that sounds weird, like like the Black Sabbath. Like it's not like clean chord changes. It's something that has that more that off tone. So I'm watching like one of this quartet, and I'm listening to the piano player, and he's doing these weird dissonant progressions like real fast, and I'm going, that sounds kind of familiar, but I'm like, I never heard this piece before. And then I thought back to that video where I looks like I'm in a trance, and I put it into the VHS player, and I get to the part where I do that weird piano thing, and it sounds just like what this guy composed. But yet I did that 12 years earlier at a rehearsal. It was just such an odd thing. And link all three of those together with that accident. I mean, at the end of the day, God allowed it, and it was for the good purpose of my testimony. But I think there was definitely some dark spiritual sides behind it,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's in sound frequencies, those are known to be gateways at a certain frequency point.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And in music, like the metal, you get so addicted to it. It's the frequency that it actually changes. Music actually changes a person's DNA. When you look around, like today, you see all these younger people mimicking their rap stars or their pop stars, or they've taken on that persona, and their DNA has actually changed. And this all gets into psychology and stuff, but it's also spiritual.
There's something to it, because I'll tell you I agree with that, and I like wholeheartedly, because I used to always say tongue in cheek. I'm actually like I'm a metal rocker guy, but like my roots are jazz. My family friend, my uncle used to play. I love jazz, to be honest. Like in my more subtle way, like. And I used to say you could take a plumber, a school teacher, an electrician, a doctor, a lawyer, put them all in a room, play jazz for them. Within 10 minutes, they're all going to be in the same mood, no matter what kind of day they had. So sound definitely, I mean, think about it. God created the universe from sound, right? Didn't he speak everything into existence? God said, let there be light, So, and we're made in his image. But now I'm going to, let me see if I can put this, because there's another part of this story I got to get out there, because this is something that nobody knows, and I hope the right people hear this. So my first wife, I found her having dates with some guy, ended up divorcing her. It was a couple of years after the accident and all. And I ended up hooking up with a childhood friend of mine that grew up in the same neighborhood, which is my second wife. Now, we ended up moving where I am now in the apartment. This is where things start getting weird again, like real odd. And I watched one of your episodes about sleep paralysis. I had a lot of that. I wanted to point that out, so a quick side thing. I started getting that back in when I was a teenager. And I remember the lady, I think her name was Joy, was talking about how things aren't 100% accurate. And I think that's why I wrote. I think I wrote that on the comment where like I was having sleep paralysis in my bedroom. I had all the rock posters, and I remember the one was a Rush Live from 1980, the Moving Pictures tour, 81 Moving Pictures tour. But yet when I had the sleep paralysis, I saw all the other posters the way they looked, except for that one looked like the Paranoid cover from Black Sabbath. I remember waking up thinking to myself, I'm like, that's odd, and I've suffered from the sleep paralysis, and of course, I feel like being attacked by a demon, and I would always say, even in that dream, I'd be like, in the name of Jesus, Satan, be gone. In the name of Jesus, Satan, be gone. And I would probably be half waking up, mumbling those words, because I know how powerful those words are, because it worked, the one time. And moving into this apartment, and again, I found out later, because what happened was we moved in. And I was keep in mind, it's a post-car accident. And I'm sitting, it's a small apartment. I'm sitting where I'm sitting now by the computer. Off to the right is a walk-in kitchen, and the bedroom's to the right of that. In front of me is the bathroom, and there's closets to the left. And I get migraines. I get a lot of visual disruptions. I could cover one eye, the other eye blacks out. And I'm looking, and my second wife was in the bedroom, and I look above the doorway, and it looks like static, like the kind of static you would get if you put like the old Channel 3 on the old television sets. And I'm blinking my eyes. I'm like, oh God, I'm like, not another residual from the accident. And then all of a sudden I look ahead of me and I see it floating over the archway by the closets. She comes and sits on the couch, and I go, what's weird what I saw? I told her what I saw, and then all of a sudden one of the closet's doors opens on its own, right? My closet door. So I go and I look, and of course I'm testing it. I'm putting it halfway to see if it sits that way. Maybe it wasn't closed. Can't do it with the doorknob. Either you close it all the way and it's locked in tight. It's an old knob. It looks like it's 100 years old. Or if you try putting it halfway, it springs back open and opens the door. So I'm like, yeah, I was like, that's weird. And she thought it was weird. Two friends of ours, my buddy Soldier, who was the bass player in my first band, the Spectrum Green, and his wife, Anna, were here. We were telling the story, and as we were telling the story, the closet door opens. As we're telling the story, and they saw it. And I told Soldier, I go, Soldier, go check the doorknob. And he tried doing the same thing I did. He goes, yeah. He goes, it doesn't shut halfway. It's either closed or open. I go, yeah. So now I'm going, what the hell's here? Neighbors upstairs, they call me because I post on Facebook about how I saw what I saw and whatever happened. And he's like, listen, Joe, he's like, the landlords didn't want you to know, but the reason why you got that apartment was because the guy before you died in there, and the body sat in there for 7 days before they found it. And his apartment upstairs, took us up there to see, some guy blew his brains out in the apartment upstairs. The blood stains are still on the wood floor. So I went from the house I lived in to another apartment where it was kind of okay, and then I'm back into a place where there's some bad juju here or something.
Man, what a lot.
I mean, and I'll tell you, and weird things started happening. And I'm going to tell you, and I tell you right now, and I actually have the drawing up on eBay because I don't need it anymore. I did a drawing of me and my second ex-wife. And the weird thing that happened with the drawing was that I came out, I did like a drawing of us in a portrait and, so on the wall. My drawing came out fine. Hers, for some reason, the eyes weren't coming out right, and they turned out black.
Wow.
And it was weird, but I kept it because the drawing was so good. I think I did a decent job with it. It looked pretty accurate. And it was like, and now I'll tell you why I find it odd, because I put it up on the wall in the bedroom when we were married. And then all of a sudden, weird things were happening at night with her. I'd wake up with her with like her fist in my mouth, and she'd be smirking, and I'd be like, "What are you doing?"
That's
like what she wasn't awake. And here's something, I don't know if you guys got a significant other. You could try this, and I did it in pure daylight, and you realize how difficult this is. Now, she used to be a dancer. Not the naughty dancer. She was a professional. She was a Nets dancer for a little bit for the basketball team, and she was supposed to audition for Janet Jackson, but then she busted her ankle and couldn't do it, whatever it was. So she has some dancing background, whatever. I was laying in the bed. She was laying next to me. I woke up. I was on my back. I woke up to her repetitively lifting her leg and touching the tip of her big toe to the tip of my big toe over and over and over again, accurately connecting. Now, I told her what she did. She said, I don't remember doing that. And I tried doing it, replicating it myself. Try it. Or just put a shoe up in your bed and try doing it. You have no idea how difficult that is to do in broad daylight while you're trying to do it. And the fact that she was doing it over and over and over again. And I started getting more of those, dreams with the sleep paralysis. And, I'd wake up in pain at times. And
that's creepy, bro. Like that's,
yeah. And it's like,
it would have been over. I'm telling you, bro.
What's that?
It would have been over for me and her. She didn't straighten herself out or get an ex. Like, man, like, that's creepy. When you said you woke up to her fist in your mouth, that would have been enough for me to start finding some kind of, prayer or whatever, whatever you have to do. But yeah, that would have been enough.
I started doing some praying around, praying off on but it was different. And I'm going to tell you, because there's more. We're divorced now. She moved down to Florida. I'm going to tell you what happened, because again, this is something that like nobody knows it's going. They know it's going on to an extent, but I'm going to give you the depth of it. So, and our relationship was fine for like 7 years. I mean, she told me I always wanted to marry you since we were kids, and like her best friend and my best friend were cousins, and and I had her best friend confirm it. Yeah, she did. She always loved you. And that's why I married her. 'Cause, I just got divorced. I mean, who gets divorced and gets married 8 months later? Or what is it, 11 months, whatever it was, 11 months later. But I did it because I knew who she was. She was a good person, a good kid. Our mothers were friends, And everything was good, even though with the weird stuff happening in the apartment, again, with this kind of stuff. And like, another thing that was weird, we have our cat, right? A beautiful creature. I mean, it's a beautiful cat, never scratches, bites, nothing. One night I woke up, and I've had cats since I was like 11 years old. Like I told you the story from when I was a kid and all. And cats are cats. I woke up, and the cat had its mouth by my ex-wife's ear, and it sounded like it was talking into it. It was like, and I'm going, I told her the next day, and I was like, dude, it sounded like the cat was talking. And she giggled, said, oh, that was cute, and blah, blah, blah. But like, she had 2 cats, and the one cat she had was like less than a year before it ran away. And so she doesn't understand cats. And I'm like, cats don't make sounds like that. And then that was like, again, in the middle of the night. Like all this stuff that you see in these horror movies, even though like, it's for effect because at night it's scary or it's dark or whatever. But again, a lot of stuff that's happening that I've experienced, it is around that 3 o'clock, even like the Amityville Horror. It really is around that time when it happens. And everything was good until, and then I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. You have to bleep that out. I know YouTube, but it's like, and then out of nowhere, like I never hit her. I never cheated on her. I'm not a gambler. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a drug addict. I'm on the level. Like, and I had a residency playing piano at a restaurant, and I lost that because of the shutdown, whatever. And then during the shutdown, a few months after, because we both got it. We got it way back in January when it first was going around, which I'll tell you right now, that's man-made. I've had flu since I was a kid. That what I experienced was not normal. I couldn't smell or taste. And usually you can't smell and taste because you're congested. This was neurological because the only thing I could smell, I would take the conditioner, the humectress, the Nexus, which is, chemicals, because chemicals ain't a true scent. You smell a black cherry, you're smelling as the particles go into the nostril. It sends, the signal to the brain, you're smelling a cherry. Chemicals trick the brain into believing it's smelling something. And that's why they'd experiment with chemicals to see if they could get chemicals that could trick the brain into believing it's a certain product, a certain item, whatever. And it's like, I could smell the humectress. I could smell the black cherry from that, but yet I could make a whole meal and I couldn't smell or taste anything. So there was something weird about that. And she got it. And I think something changed her with that for some extent. I don't know where she goes, I want a divorce. I don't love you anymore. And I asked her, I go, why? She says, I don't know. I just don't love you anymore. And that went on for a bit in time. And then it turns out, and this is important information I want to get out there, because I tried contacting the FBI, law enforcement, and trust me, it's useless. She was being scammed by an internet romance scam artist, okay? Took her for $30,000 within about a year and a half. At first, when she told me she was seeing someone else and this and that, and she gave me the papers to sign, I thought it was a real person. She's like, yeah, I'm moving down the shore, blah, blah, blah. I'm leaving you. And I was heartbroken because, again, like after a car accident, the brain damage causes the emotional, receptors to be altered. So it's like I feel things a lot stronger than I did before my accident. And it was like breaking my heart. And I was just like, why? I didn't do anything wrong. I don't deserve this. And she's like, well, things change. And because I had to talk with her before we got married. I said, listen, I can't go through another divorce. I said, if we get married, it's death till we part. It's like, and that's it. And she's like, no, I want to be with you the rest of my life. And I pointed that out to her. She's like, well, things change. And she became really cold and distant. But it was odd because we were still being intimate. And even after the divorce went through, we were intimate still. Like, it was like, and I was doing it because, in the eyes of God, we were still married, whether that paper was signed or not. It's like the Bible says, unless, for fornication, you're still married. You don't, you don't separate what God puts together. So I'm still trying to maintain this, this marriage while she's talking to this scam artist. Okay. Now, this is the thing I want everybody to know. I didn't know this was going on because I'm like, every time this guy's supposed to show up, he doesn't show up, but yet she's still sending him hand over fist money. I'm talking like Christmas bonuses, thousands of dollars. He's like, well, I need money. I'm in the military, but I need a plane ticket and blah, blah, blah. She sent the plane ticket, the copy of the plane ticket to my cousin. My cousin said, this isn't even real. It's from Singapore to Syria. And her cousin that was in the Air Force told her everything this guy's saying isn't true. It's not how things are. And then anybody who went against the scam artist, she pushed away. People who really love her, she pushed away for the scam artist, which I'm like, how? Like, she's not this dumb. Like, you know what I mean? Like, nobody's this ignorant that they could believe this and over and over and over again. And I looked it up. I did homework. And at the time, they estimated about $7 billion were sent overseas to these scam artists, right? One night, and this is where I learned why it's going on. And I'll tell you another thing. My ex-mother-in-law, who was in her 80s, got taken by somebody because her bank account was emptied. And this lady was frugal. Let me tell you, she was a depression baby. That lady was frugal, and her bank account was emptied. And after she died, there was a guy with a Middle Eastern voice on the answer machine asking for her, like, Helen, where are you? Helen, pick up. Helen, right? And they all got those Middle Eastern voices because I heard him because she thought he was Spanish. She's like, oh, he's got this hot Spanish accent. And then one day when I was on the couch taking a nap, she thought I was sleeping and she had it on speakerphone and I heard him talking. And I told her, I go, listen, I heard the guy you're talking to. I go, that's not a Spanish accent. Because I actually like Middle Eastern food. I got friends that are Jordanian. And, I used to go to the restaurant in Patterson. And I know that accent very well. I was like, that's not Spanish. That's an Arabic accent. She's like, he's Spanish. And it was like she was so attached to him, like emotionally, that like you do not badmouth him. Like she was like protective of whoever this entity on the other side. And she cut off everybody who told her, like, it's a scam. Why are you going along? Cut them all off. They didn't understand. Like, don't you know this is the pinnacle was one night. It was in 2024, right? She moved out in September 24. January 24. It was nighttime. I made dinner for us, got along. We watched some Cheers, the old TV show, laughed together. Everything was fine. I hear her talking to the scam artist on the phone. And this is important. Afterwards, I didn't hear anything. The cat comes and gets me. And, I believe God works through animals too, no doubt. They're blessings. So the cat comes and gets me to bring me into the bedroom. No, I'm sorry, not yet. No, that was after. First, I go into the bedroom because I had to get something out of the side drawer, whatever. And I walk by her. Now, my ex-wife, like her character is, she would never hold a phone to the side of her head. She would always put it on speaker so she was always looking at things on Facebook or Insta, whatever she would do. She's very fidgety like that. I walk into the room and she's holding the phone to the side of her head, facing the wall, with this dead ass stare on, like a zombie. And as I walk by, I heard in the phone, Like, and I'm a musician, and I know frequency, the pulsing, and I'm like, that's a hypnotic pulse. I go, that's not a call waiting tone. That's not. And if she was, she would be holding the phone. She never would do that. It's not a ringtone. It's none of that. I'm like, when I heard that, I realized I'm like that they're hypnotizing her. They're using sound frequencies to hypnotize these women over the phone. And there's none of that written anywhere on the FBI website. I didn't read it anywhere or see it in any video. Nothing. I don't think anybody knows this, because when it's being done, it's being so covertly done. So I go back in the living room. Then that's when the cat gets me, because usually comes, I pet her on the, by the window, whatever. I walk in the room. We were getting along fine. She explodes. MFer, you piece of S. I'm tired of this. Blah, blah. I mean, and this isn't her personality either. She just exploded. Foul language, aggressive. I want you out. I want you out. We've been divorced. I need, get out of here. I don't want you around anymore. I'm tired of this. I'm like, what'd I do wrong? She's like, I'm tired of you watching what I'm doing and listening to who I'm talking to. And I said, I'm not interested in who you're talking to, what you do. I'm just concerned about your health because I love you. And I left it at that, and I walked out. I sent her a video to watch, whatever. The next day, she went to work. I didn't talk to her the rest of the night. And then the next day, she writes back, oh, thanks, I'll check it out at work. Like nothing ever happened. And that's what they're doing. They're using sound frequencies to hypnotize these women over the phone. And nothing's being done about it at all. And a friend of mine who's a lawyer, I told her about. I said, because she knew, because my friend got her, that cheap lawyer thing to get a $700 divorce or whatever it was, and she's like, well, she didn't tell me much. She said she just met this guy in the military and blah blah blah. And I told her what happened, and she looked it up, and she's pretty smart. She's a lawyer, and she's like, Dell, you're right. She's like, they say that you can hypnotize someone over a phone. And that's what happened. Like she started talking to this guy because the guy complimented her on Instagram, which she should have never done in the first place. And here's the thing too. When she would, like another time when she was like kind of going off on me, whatever, I tried the same thing I did with my first wife. I was like, in the name of Jesus, Satan be gone. And she's like, that's another thing. I'm tired of hearing you talk about God and Jesus. And that's one of the reasons why she told me she divorced me. She's like, you talk about God too much. And she was tainted because, she did go to a church. I remember when we were kids, my church ended up doing like a camp by her church or whatever. That's why I married her, because I knew she went to church. I asked her, is she Christian? And, is Jesus your savior? Yeah, whatever. But she had family members. She has an uncle that was one of those false pastors, not a good human being, and kind of turned her off a bit. Like, she's like, yeah, they're Bible thumpers. They try to push it down your throat and put you down and call you a sinner and this and that. So she's a little damaged with that, but not like to the point where she told me, she's like, one of the reasons why I'm divorced, you talk about God too much. And she doesn't remember saying that. I told it, afterwards, a year or two later, I was like, and I go, and plus you told me I talk about God too much. I'm like, like you can never talk about God too much. She's like, I never said that. So she doesn't even remember saying that. So whatever's going on with these scam artists, they're hypnotizing them. The worst thing these women could do is be on a phone with them. So that's information I need to get out there, because this pretty much ruined my marriage and put me in a very bad situation in life, period. All because of these scam artists.
Yeah, man, that's wild, dude. That's
it's a lot of sound frequency is can do stuff like that. It sounds like your ex there is suffering from some kind of possession too.
Yeah.
Was it through sound frequencies? Possible. Did it happen before? Has it been following her since she was a child? I don't know, but definitely there's possession there.
Let me tell you something. Ever since she moved out of here, there's a feeling of peace in this apartment now.
Yeah, it's possession, man.
I feel it, and I'll tell you. And I'll tell you guys a weird thing that happened.
Just really quick, we got 6 minutes on this thing, so.
Oh, we'll roll it down.
Yeah,
we're you know what? I got everything I wanted to get out, so I'm happy with that. But here's the thing. Another thing that happened when we were still sleeping in the same bed together, even though we were divorced. And I had this dream. Now, just piece this one together. I was in the kitchen, and I was taking communion. I was taking the host and the wine. Okay, I started off Catholic as a kid, but same thing. Whatever. The bread and the body. And in the dream afterwards, I walked from the kitchen and laid down in the bed on my back, and then I woke up in a semi-sleep paralysis. I guess you'd say it was weird, but I saw what looked like, I guess, the garments that Jesus would have worn, but where the face should be, there was nothing. And it was whatever this entity was holding my hands through the sheet, in the dream. And I just felt so much energy and power surge through me from whatever this was. But it didn't feel evil. I assumed it may have been the Holy Spirit. And then I woke up and the sheets were embedded in my hands. And I got goosebumps telling this. And what I did, I tested it. You guys could try it. Just put a sheet over you. Lay on your back, put a sheet over you, and try grabbing the sheet while the sheet's laying over your hands. You can't do it. The sheet doesn't have any weight that sits like it's a light sheet, where it would sink into your hand. But both sheets were embedded in my hands, where I saw what I saw holding my hands. And I questioned them, like, it felt like a good energy. Could have been the Holy Spirit? Because it's weird that I would start to dream off by taking the bread and the wine, and then going back into bed, and then this was holding my hands. And I felt a peace from it. But the thing that, I tell you what, that Bible, I've read front to back a few times. The one verse that really bothers me, that really, really just, I can't explain, where it says how even the devil could appear as an angel of light. That bothers me, because am I going to be confused and I think something holy, and meanwhile it's something evil?
Yeah, it's possible. The best thing to do is always say, if you're not from the kingdom of Christ, I rebuke you.
Yeah, at the time in the bed, I couldn't even speak. Like I was writhing on the bed, but like I just felt this surge of like positive energy. That's what it felt like, So may have been. I took it as that was God trying to show me that I'm with you, Joe. You're going through some really tough time right now, but I'm never going to leave you. So I took it as a positive thing. So I don't think that the enemy would try to do something to make my faith grow. Like I don't think there'd be a gain from that. But I remember that happening. It was very powerful. And like I said, I used logic and reason first. It could have been a dream. This could have been, but the sheets were embedded in my hands. You can't do it. You can't grab a sheet while it's above it. When you try like closing your fingers, the sheet will stay above them as you try to close them when you're laying under them. So that was something pretty powerful. But like I said, ever since she's gone, like this apartment just feels at peace, to be honest. And I haven't witnessed anything weird. I've had not one sleep paralysis happen where when she was here, I was getting them constantly and praying before I went to bed out loud. In the name of Jesus, I cast any evil spirits or entities or fallen angels or demons out of this room before we go to bed. And, because I was getting nailed with the sleep paralysis and those weird, like that Lady Joy was speaking of. And again, some are sexual. Like, I'll be honest. And it's like I would wake up where in the dream, one of them were putting their finger up my bottom, and I'd wake up with pain in my rectum, like just laying in bed. Like there was nothing going on. I'd be laying on my stomach when I woke up. But what she was talking about, yeah, I experienced it. But after my second wife moved out, nothing. I've been here for 9 months now, and I've not experienced anything in this apartment since. And I actually feel kind of peace in here now. But the thing that I wanted to go back to, the reason why when I said, in the name of Jesus, Satan be gone, with her, and it didn't work, I realized, because she's being hypnotized. I think the demons are using technology now, And again, we only got a few minutes.
We got like 1 minute, brother. I got to close it out.
Let's close. Listen, I think I got everything I needed to get out. So thank you.
No
thank
problem,
you.
Dude. Yeah, because literally, bro, like I buy these memory chips at 2 hours for that reason, so it doesn't just drag on. You know what I mean? So it's gonna close out right now. So thank you again for coming on the show. Yeah, man, that's like a lot to unpack, man. That's a really,
yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Let me see here. So, yes, as I said, these kind of episodes, if anybody has a story like this to tell, a message, a positive message, please reach out to us. We want to hear these kind of testimonies. It's a little bit different outside of always having these authors and stuff like that. We want to hear the, stories from different individuals and just kind of connect the dots, you know what I mean? But thank you, everybody, for listening to The Sabbath at Midnight. I'm your host, Lionel Tavares. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys learned something new. I hope you guys that have experiences similar can connect the dots. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Get these stories out there. You never know who's out there having these same experiences and has nobody to share it with. And then, they can listen to these stories and not feel so alone. And, just make the whole body of Christ grow. So thank you again. It is, where are we at right now? We are in California. It is about, what time is it right now? It's about 5:30 in the afternoon, and my buddy's calling all the way from New Jersey. So thank you also for that, for waiting up late and telling your story at this hour. So, all right, guys, we are signing out, and we will talk to you guys soon. I'm going to close out here. Just hang on the line, and we'll chat for a bit.
Of 1,000 thanks in a day, knowing I gotta give him more praise when I pray. Finally I feel alive and I know why, cause I'm giving all the glory to the Most High. They don't wanna hear the truth, that is no lie. If we ain't in the last days, then we're close by. The devil's trying to snatch your soul and it's not a game. You hear me saying Jesus Christ and it's not in vain. They might get offended every time I drop his name, but I'ma let them know that I'm not ashamed. Can't be content with just church on Sunday, or just going through the motions, cause one day I'ma have to give account for my time spent, and where my empty words and all of that pride went. Calamity bringing clarity. Seems like a good church these days is a rarity. 1 out of 7 in the book of Revelation. A perverse generation on the verge of devastation. A sign of the times, realizing that I'm in danger if I don't put my mind to the grind and do a work of the Lord. Every verse is a